Hello, hello. I see people are shifting from the waiting room into the webinar. Thank you very much. This is the fourth day of the SBA Maine Export Week 2023. I, of course, am going to do my introduction as people come in because I find people in the first 5 minutes, we get a big crowd come in, which is great. As you know, if you've been paying attention, this is a, whoops, let me just go back to the previous one there. This is a Export Week is being hosted by the Maine Small Business Development Center and the Women's Business Center. We already went through day one, which was why export and am I ready? We heard from the SBA on the hoorah speech on getting exports going. We talked about some resources on where to start, how to narrow down the world as far as which countries I might be interested in and might be good for my particular service or product. Then we went on to the second day, Tuesday. We talked with Maine International Trade Center and then a whole bunch of other different resources that they brought in to talk about some resources available to people in Maine, especially. Then we had yesterday we had local banks, we had XM Bank, we had the SBA, all talk to us about the export finance programs specifically designed for financing export companies. That was interesting as well. Then today we have Grace from the Women's Business Center, who is going to talk to us about developing an export business plan. As we said in day one, there were two different things that really was a starting stone. One was identifying where we might want to export, and number two, or actually number one, was the business plan, right? Understanding, are you ready for importing or exporting? And how does that affect your business plan to make sure that you can think it through before actually pulling the trigger to make sure that you're thinking of all the different logistics that go into exporting. And tomorrow, to wrap up the week, we are going to have a small business export panel where we get other small businesses who are already exporting to come in, and that's your time to shine, to give questions, to hear their feedback and hear their stories about how they did it and how they felt it was beneficial to their business. You can still register if you want. The registration, if you don't know by now, was a one registration and you got one link and you got access to the webinar for the entire week. Kelsey's been great about every morning sending out an email reminder with the link just in case you had lost it. So that should be in your email if you register. These are being recorded. They are being recorded, but if you're not here live, you don't get to ask the questions. If you're watching the recording, you're only able to see what questions might have been asked and what the answers were. So I do urge you to watch live, especially tomorrow when we have the business panel, because that's where you're going to learn the most. If you subscribe to the Maine Small Business Development Center YouTube channel, you will get notifications when we put new videos up on the YouTube channel just like this. So that's the easiest way to keep abreast of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Now, through this webinar, you might have questions, which is great. We encourage questions. Questions is exactly why we do them live rather than just recording them. So if you have a question, please just put it down in the chat. Most of the time, the chat is on your bottom of the Zoom. Sometimes it's on the top, but we just had someone put something in chat, might have been Kelsey, and so you might see it blinking. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Try to make it a general question so everyone can benefit from it. If it's a very specific question that really only pertains to your particular situation, which is fine, we encourage that as well. But if it's specific to your situation, just use my email down here. Right on the bottom of my picture should be my email. So you can just send me an email directly and we can talk off the webinar about your very specific question. But otherwise, if it's general questions, please feel free to throw it in the chat and we will either answer it or get to it at the end of the presentation. Because as I said today, whoops, my chat just came up. Today we have, well, first off, we can't do this without all the resources. Many many resources that had helped us with this this whole presentation, this whole week. Couldn't have done it with the help of all these people here: SBA, Women's Business Center, Bangor Gorham Savings, U.S. Commercial Service, Navitrade, Score, Dental Lace, North American Kelp, Jinx Products, Maine International Trade Center, Export Tech, and the Export Exim Bank. Thank you everyone for helping put this together. Now today, we have an honored guest. Grace Mo-Phillips is going to be here from the Women's Business Center, and she is a program director for the CEI Women's Business Center South. And she is going to be talking about the International Business Plan. So Grace, take it away.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, everyone. So good to see so many faces here today. I thought I would lose this webinar to the weather. I'm so glad that you decided to stay indoors, sadly, to have this discussion. I have a little disclaimer. I have 2 dogs, and I have to work from home today, so I have 2 dogs, and they are pretty vocal. Hopefully, they will stay quiet throughout this session, and but I apologize upfront if they want to chime in during the session. So this week has been packed with information, and I hope today's session, let me share my screen here, would be helpful. What we do today is to talk about how to develop an international business plan. Now, the objective is not really to not to discuss how to write a business plan here, but to apply the business plan model as a guide for us to develop a robust export strategy. So again, like Peter said, I'm Grace Phillips from the CEI Women's Business Center. Just like SBDC and SCORE, the Women's Business Center is a SBA resource partner. We provide no-cost, one-on-one business advising. Our focus is to help female aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners to start and grow their business. And we offer targeted professional development trainings and resources to help overcome challenges that disproportionately affect female entrepreneurs. But we don't turn down any entrepreneurs, regardless of gender, whose needs align with our expertise either. I am passionate about export-import. I have been involved in international trade at various capacity for nearly 30 years. And I also have a business that does export trading. So it's a interesting topic for me today to talk about business planning, and hopefully I have some stories to share with you as well. So we talk about international business planning. Why is it important? Well, for some, we might have just started our business here in the US organically, right? We never had to create a business plan unless there's a need for business lending, right? We go apply for a business loan, then we develop a business plan. But for international expansion, it is really important to develop a business plan before you bring your product or you bring your business overseas. Just think about Canada. Believe it or not, it is actually a market outside of the US, right? They are, even though the language, the culture, climates, and everything, it cannot be closer to the US, right? But the 2 markets even though it's really similar, and we are under the USMCA trade agreement with Canada, there's still a lot of differences between the 2 markets. Packaging regulations, for instance, minimum wage standards, currency, right? All those could have a profound impact on your business, and particularly if you are a small business. Even big companies like Target, Big Lots, what else? Best Buy, Sears, all those large players, they all shuttered their business in Canada at one point or another. So that is why for us, small businesses, it is really helpful to carefully plan our export strategies and set some realistic goals. So I want to emphasize, we are not here to talk about how to write a business plan, but we want to follow the flow of a business plan and bring export elements in to help you map out your export strategies. So what are the export elements associated with exporting? Well, there's a lot if you look at it, right? So definitely there's a lot of consideration. Just to start, like Peter mentioned on Monday, which market do you want to export to and why? Why do you pick that country or market? There's no cookie cutter approach when it comes to exporting because every country is different and unique. So what we'll do today is to focus on the orange topics here on the right side and how these fit into your overall business model that that is on the left column. But again, this is just an hour-and-a-half session. We cannot simply cover everything. So we just want to have an overview of these areas and know that there are resources available here in Maine. MITC, SBDC, Women's Business Center, SCORE, we are all here to help you walk through the planning process. So now let's talk about your business. The first thing you really want to do is to assess your company's in this current stage or current state, right? You may say, hey, I know this is my business. I know my company inside out. What's the point here? Let's just pick legal name here as an example. If your business is ABC company, okay, no big deal. But think about it. What does the name sound like? Or what does the name mean in a different language? One joke that I heard was, here in the US, we have chips and salsa, right? Salsa, the word salsa in Korean language, it also sounds like salsa, which means diarrhea. So you might want to avoid some of these little taboo or, the things may get lost in translation. So what does your name mean in the overseas market matter? Organizational structure and ownership. Whatever entity structure you are established here in the US, is there any tax implication if you want to set up the same business or you want to set up a subsidiary in a different country, right? In terms of ownership, would you, the mothership, be the owner in your overseas operation? Or would you have a partnership or would you have a joint venture, for instance? How would that change the management in your organization? Locations. Well, Maine has a very strong brand in the US domestically. Well, then location-wise, we have easy access to major shipping ports. We are close to Europe. We have great resources, natural resources. But people outside of the US may not be aware of all these resources we have. They don't know how good we are, right? And if I tell you about, let's say, Lofoten, you will say, what? And actually, it's a town, it's a region in Norway that is famous for Arctic cod. But, it can be a very famous area, but not many people know about it. So just don't assume that all we have here in Maine is well known, globally. So you might have to educate your potential customers how good Maine is. But do know that we do have some advantage being in Maine because of, close to the big cities. We are right by the Atlantic Ocean. All of those can be beneficial to us. Business size. Do the current resources in the company show capacity for you to expand overseas? Do you have enough human resources? Is the business generating in a sufficient cash flow that can fund your overseas operations. Those are some of the areas that you might want to think about. And what is your business or your company's mission and vision at this moment? Now, here in the U.S., the U.S. is one of the forerunners in the B Corp, global movement these days. A lot of companies, they want to achieve high social and environmental responsibilities and performance. How would that affect or influence your company as to where to do business in, right? And then finally, benchmark. Is there any successes you have achieved so far already? For instance, you've been getting inquiries from a particular region or country. Does it imply that there might be a demand for your product or services? If you already met a certain compliance standards in certain country, let's say in Latin America, does it make sense to explore other neighboring countries in that region to leverage what you already established, right? Now, all these, assessing your current business would bring to looking at the big picture. How would your export planning fit into this current model? Are you ready to export, right? If you are, awesome. But if you are not yet, let's find where the gap is. Is it financial? Is it human resources? Is it facilities, right? So all those can help you get yourself ready. And I think more important question is, based on what you see, is top management ready to commit to export? It's a timely process to develop a new market. It doesn't happen overnight, right? So how much time is a company willing and able to wait before seeing a return on investment is important. So once you commit to it, you invest in a foreign market, you want to see it grow. You don't want to just pull out of the market after a year when when things are not happening as fast as you want to be. So, this is why we want to compare where you are right now and whether you are ready for the next step. So when we talk about how to enter into a overseas market, there are basically two models. The first one is called indirect export. You are a U.S. producer here, right? You essentially, in an indirect export model, you outsource your export activities and strategies to someone else to do it. It could be an export company or trading company located here in the US or overseas. And they handle all the export formalities and compliances and sales marketing in those foreign markets. You, as a US producer, basically just sell products to another company here in the US. So the advantage of doing that is relatively low cost and low risk for the producer. You are working with a domestic company. So, in terms of currency exchange, there's none to deal with, and you are dealing with the US laws and regulations, right? So that is an easy way if you are looking at generating, trying to increase revenues quickly. This might be the model to go by. Now, this, I jumped too fast here. There's a disadvantage as well in going indirect, is you don't have a whole lot of control in your overseas market. You rely on the exporters and the overseas counterparts to determine where to place your products, how much to price your product, and the distribution of your products. So you have very little control of the brand that you want to present. Now, direct exporting, you as the US producer would be very much involved in every aspect in the overseas market. You may own your sales and marketing staff in that foreign market. You hire the locals there, or you may send your US staff to that foreign market. to handle all the sales and marketing. Or you can work with a foreign representative. Foreign representative can come in many forms. It could be a sales rep who usually has a special interest, for instance, some form of exclusivities to sell your products in that foreign market. Another form of sales foreign rep would be licensee. It can be a licensing agreement, it could be a franchise agreement, or even joint venture. Depending on the business and the products, some business may sell directly to the foreign retailers. For instance, if you are a blueberry producer, you might sell to Carrefour, which is a French grocery chains that sell in 30 different countries, right? So they're big enough to buy and handle all the logistics themselves. Or if you selling online, you might sell directly to the end user. I do think that if you sell directly to the end user, sometimes the volume is small, or maybe you conduct an online business. It's not easy to manage if you work directly with an end user. For instance, how do you manage the local tax, payment? They have this VAT in a lot of countries. How do you handle logistics in a foreign country from here, if you are here in the US? And any after-sales services, for instance, how do you offer return or repair policies overseas if you deal with them directly, right? But certainly there are advantages of doing direct. One, you have better control of the distribution, sales, and marketing, and you can potentially maximize your profit margins. But the advantage is, you have a deeper involvement, and that usually equate to heavier investment upfront. So market selection. Peter on Monday, he walked us through various resources to identify potential markets. It's not easy, I have to say. There are about 195 countries in the world. Where if you have never exported, where do you start? There's really no reference point here, right? It's like throwing darts in the dark. So what I would suggest is, try to apply a funnel process. Set some criteria to help you rank potential market, which I would, what those criteria I would cover in the next slide. For instance, you may want to ask yourself, what are the goals for our business in the short term, medium term, and long term? Is your goal to diversify your market? Or is it to increase your revenues, or to increase your market share, or to extend a product life cycle? All those can affect which market would be right for you, right? Let's say if you are looking for high growth potentials, you may want to find those markets that are less saturated with similar products, but that may also pose some risk as well. So it might take a while to see, for you to really see some return on investment. Now, maybe you might want to look at volume potentials, to sell a lot of your products. And then you might have to consider, is there any price competitiveness there? Because chances are, if you are selling something, in huge volume, it might become a kind of like a commodity. So your margin might not be as high as you would like it to be, in those markets. So those might help you think through which market would be right for you that fit with my immediate goal. Another thing to think about is the U.S. currently has free trade agreements with 20 different countries, right? These free trade agreements provide U.S. exporter lower import duties and they have more intellectual property protection that makes it easy for U.S. companies to sell their products in those countries. So maybe that's a starting point as well. Whichever metrics you decide to use, my motto is when I talk to clients who are looking at exporting or any business essentially, is to pick the lowest hanging fruits right? Choose the easiest one to start. Once you build that momentum and experience in exporting, then you can, you can really diversify your reach. So now, these are the criteria that I talked about earlier, in the last slide. The Michigan State University, they have what they call a global edge. It has a lot of resources to really touch on, this list. So as the CIA World Factbook or the International Trade Administration, they have a country commercial guide. I put all those resources at the end of this slide deck. So when you get the this copy of the slide deck, it would have all the links set up for you. So it will become your library that you can refer to if you want to use this list as a starting point to help you choose your countries. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, products and services. One thing that we have to unlearn in our head is what we do well in the US may not apply in a different country. So you might be selling a particular product exceptionally well in the US. Don't always assume it will be the case in other countries. You do want to look at each market independently, right? Here's a list of questions that you want to review to see, what is the right product for those markets that you targeted, particularly if there's any modification needed. Like my example earlier, if you sell anything to Canada, do you need to modify the label so that it will incorporate French, for instance? When it comes to export-import restriction, there's one new rule that just launched early this year in 2023 is the Disruptive Technology Strike Force. The purpose of this strike force is to protect critical technological assets from being acquired by nation-state adversaries such as China, Russia, North Korea, and so on. There are a lot of U.S. agencies behind this task force: the Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, FBI, ICE, and U.S. attorney offices as well. So it's a very new or somewhat new regulation. If you are an exporter or developer of advanced technology, I would say, pay particular vigilance, when it comes to complying protocols. And so let's see. Yeah, the rest of the list is just to help you think through. Now, this is a fun one. Competitive analysis. Again, we have to think about when you compete on a global stage, your competitors is not that company next town to you. It's not even a company in Ohio or North Carolina. It could be a company in Dubai. It could be a company in Singapore. You just don't know, but you want to know, right? You try to understand who the key players are on the world stage that are potentially your competitors. The bottom question here, what are the keys to your ability to compete? Sometimes what you're competing is not just your product or your customers. You might be competing with infrastructures or local resources. For instance, if you have to ship products to a country that has import quotas to your kind of products, you are fighting for those quotas, right? Or if you need cold storage for frozen products, for instance, or chilled products, sometimes it's really hard to find cold storage in the overseas market, and you might have to really fight for those spaces, and that has nothing to do with your products or your customers. One example is you might want to establish a good relationship with a reliable freight forwarder, for instance. Several years ago, the global logistic, it's just went haywire, right? It was really hard to find vessels, and there were a lot of delays or sometimes cancellation of vessels and whatnot. And your product could be sitting in the warehouse here domestically and not shipping. So you incur a lot of extra or unnecessary costs in storage while you could be shipping the products and generate revenues. So those are the areas that you might want to think through outside of just your products and outside of just the market that you want to export to. International markets and sales. Chances that your customer or your immediate customers are not the end user of your product. You might be working with an importer, you might be working with a trader or a distributor, right? So or maybe the other way around, you could be selling here in the US a business to consumer, basis, but when you sell overseas, you might be selling business to business model. So how would that affect your unique value proposition to your immediate customers? Something really simple. For instance, when I work with my my overseas customer, they once told me that they worked with me because I respond to their emails quickly. Simple as that, right? It's not, I have a unique product, but somehow I offer something that is unique to them. So that became something that I used as my marketing a strategy, that I would respond to any inquiry, whether it's a big order or small order. So those are some of the things that you might want to rethink. What is your sales strategy? What is your marketing model when it comes to selling, to your immediate customer overseas? And another area to think about is who will be conducting those marketing and sales strategies? Is it your overseas partners, or is it you, directing those efforts in those countries? And who is responsible when it comes to the investment, like the marketing expenses? Would you here in the home office be covering those expenses, or your partner will be covering those expenses? So those are some of the areas that you might want to talk to your overseas partner as well before you enter into those agreements, and who is responsible in terms of sales and marketing investment. Now, okay, cultural assessments. To me, the cultural aspect is what makes international trade fun. We can talk about this all day long because there's so many things to think about. For, let's say, first impression matters in a lot of countries, right? When you first meet a overseas customer, how do you give that business card? What is the proper dress code when you meet someone for the first time? And how do you, start a initial engagement in terms of communication? Do you cold call some potential customers? Do you send cold call or cold email to start a conversation, or what, right? A lot of countries, they prefer face-to-face interactions. So maybe what you want to do is to take advantage of the STEP program, SBA STEP program, and go to an international trade show. That's where you will meet potential customers face-to-face. And once you start those relationships, how do you continue to communicate with them? Do you go by emails? Do they want to communicate with you by phone calls? So does it mean that you have to call Asia at 10 o'clock at night here, or you have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to call Europe, right? Some countries, they would do business on WhatsApp only. WhatsApp is kind of like a messaging app that you just type messages to each other. and I have a lot of customers WhatsApp me, and we close deals on WhatsApp. And this, that's our agreement. So those are the fun things that you might have to figure out before you have your first meeting with your potential customer, for instance. One thing too is, looking at the brand development here. In my experience, brand perception or brand loyalty is really critical in certain parts of the world. Some consumers are less price sensitive if they have established a loyalty to a certain brand. It doesn't have to be, I have seen products selling a US brand or a European brand. They are products that we care less about, but they have a very strong brand presence in Asia, and people would pay ridiculous price to buy those products. So just think about how you would want to establish your brand in some of these countries that that can help maximize your profitability in those countries. Legal issues. One example that pop up would be if you're selling food products, for instance. Do you need to get kosher or halal compliance? Those certifications, or if you between countries, there might be some regulations. One example is I keep telling other people is I export products to Thailand, right? From a country to country level, there's not a whole lot of regulations. But once the products arrived into Thailand, the local FDA, they have another sets of restrictions that, are set for products that are sold locally. So you may have to help your customer overseas to comply with those regulations. Sometimes you may have to send them your food safety certifications or send them your licenses, things like that, to help them prove that your products are safe to be consumed in those markets. Another thing too is observe any privacy laws in those countries, particular how much data you can collect in EU versus in Asia versus in South America, right? Because those might affect how you interact with your customers. And again, there are resources out there. ITA, International Trade Administration, their website lists out all those foreign regulations. That is really helpful. Okay, risk mitigation. It's a long list here. I'm not here trying to scare you, but just want to bring up as many as I can think of, so then you are well prepared. For instance, I think very important for U.S. companies is the IP protection. Trademarks can easily be infringed overseas, right? Some countries have very different legal systems. Well-known brands like New Balance, Gucci, they have lost their IP lawsuits in other countries in the past, and eventually they did turn over, but it was really costly. And we as small businesses, we don't have that luxury to spend millions and millions of dollars in lawsuits overseas. So we cannot prevent all mishaps overseas, but identify some areas might help you be less vulnerable and know what resources are available to help you mitigate when these things happen. So this is where our resources are here to help. MITC, all the SBA resource partners are here. We might not have all the answers for you, but we can help direct you to the right agencies to seek assistance. So again, this is just to help you get prepared for those moments. Now, when it comes to operations and logistics, I think operations anticipate that what I mean is you might want to anticipate how exporting might affect your domestic operations, right? Will your overseas order compete with your domestic production? Exporting sounds exciting and sexy and all, but we don't want to put ourselves in a place where we can't see the forest for the trees. So before you engage in exporting, what measure can be put in place to balance your existing market, right? And logistically, can your in-house shipping department handle global logistics? Is it better to outsource those issues to a freight forwarding or a custom broker, right? And how do you manage your inventory and storage overseas? So those are the things that, again, you want to incorporate into your planning. What am I doing here? Next screen. Oh, okay. Pricing consideration. Okay. This slide alone can be a full day workshop. So I'm not going to address them in detail, but be aware of what these are. When people talk about landed costs, it doesn't mean, the products that leave your production facility here in the US. It might, it always include freight, ocean freight, air freight, whatever the international mode of transport is. Import duties overseas, port charges, custom fees, all those, by the time the products land into your customer's warehouse, there are a lot of costs involved. So you might be selling your product at $10 out of your factory. By the time it gets to the port of Singapore, it might be $15. So when your customer negotiate prices with you, you realize that, wow, it adds a lot to the price tag when the products are being sold in those overseas market. So be aware of them. In Incoterms, when it comes to pricing, when you quote your overseas customers, there are 11 Incoterms. Those are the standard terms that you would want to quote your customers. What are they? You might have heard FOB, you might have heard CFR or CIF, right? Those are Incoterms. And again, I'm not going to talk in details each of them, but what those Incoterms do is to rule and define the responsibility and risk of the seller and the buyers. Let's say if you sell your products to an overseas buyer in the term of CFR, that means in your price to them, you will cover the cost and the freight. That's all you cover, right? Once the product hit the water and everything else, all the costs after that would be borne by the buyer. That's an example. So familiarize yourself with those 11 Incoterms. Payment terms, again, payment terms, that is one area. What is favorable to you as a seller is usually unfavorable to the buyer overseas and vice versa. So you do have to negotiate a term that can be mutually beneficial and find a common ground that can balance the risk on both ends of the negotiation table. Choice of currency. If you ask me, I would say always quote in US dollars, but sometimes, some deals might not happen. So if you have to sell in a foreign currency, what would what do you do, right? What might be some of the hedge tool to help you minimize your risk in terms of currency fluctuation or exchange rate fluctuations? perceived value and demand. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, US products has a reputation or represent high quality and reliable products and whatnot. Sometimes I would say that the perceived value in the overseas market is a lot higher than our domestic market here. So if you understand them, you'll know how to maximize your profit in those markets. I'll leave it at that. So you figure it out. It's your pricing strategy. So now coming to the financial, there's no fun way to talk about financials, right? If you hate cash flow projection, you hate P&L projection, you have to do it, particularly when it comes to overseas market. You do want to set expectation. You understand what is your projected revenues, expenses overseas. The reason is, with time and again, you hear me and Peter talk about all the time, it's a very time-consuming process to develop an overseas market. If you see return on investment in a year time, you are really lucky, honestly. You know, sometimes it takes 2-3 years before the market can really take off. So you do want to have those projections to gauge whether it is right for you to do it now, or you can set goals that, okay, given our domestic performance right now, maybe within, it would be more realistic in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. So I cannot present it more fun. This is something that we will have to do. And the only good news is SBDC SCORE Women's Business Center, we can help you come up with those projections. We can walk you through the process so you don't feel so lonely doing this yourself. All right. So basically, I do want to just highlight a couple resources here. SBA has this export business planner. The hyperlink is right on top here. So when you get this slide deck, you click on that, you will get to this planner. Very detailed, walk you through how to develop a export plan. Next screen, this is the ITA I kept raving about. Lots of resources, you can click to it, and yeah, this should be your best friend. Bookmark this link, and you'll find a lot of useful tools here. This is Exim Bank. We heard about the resources Exim Bank offered yesterday. My business, I used the export credit insurance. Wonderful, really was a game changer for me, that I could take more risk with new overseas buyers using the insurance. So it's another great tool to hedge your risk. Here on Tuesday, MITC talked about the STEP grant. I'm not going to repeat that, but here's the link. If you ever lose the Tuesday note, at least you have this note here today you can go back to. And if you are working with agricultural products, U.S. agricultural products, or U.S. food producer here, this USDA market access program would be one good program for you. It's a similar to STEP program. It's a reimbursement program for any of your export marketing activities. So Food Export is the administrator for this program. So here finally is the list that I mentioned. Click on these hyperlinks here. It would direct you to those websites, and you can do your research. So with all that said, I am going to stop my screen share and open up to any questions you might have.
Well, we did have in the comment section that Zeynep from the Maine International Trade Center said that you can also contact her, and she has her email there for any step-related questions. I want to point that out too.
Thank you, Zena.
And Grace did a wonderful job going through a very dense subject matter. And I've always warned my clients that, like anything in life that's really complex, you really need to break it down into baby steps, right? So don't try to sit down and do an international business plan in one day. It's not going to happen, right? You really want to strategize, plan this out, and just take one task at a time. So with Grace's presentation, we take one slide at a time and work on one subject at a time to really understand what's in. And some slides will take many days to really get into the guts of what you're doing. But planning is really indispensable to understand how, should you go forward, right? That's the whole point of a business plan. Is, do I get enough information to make the decision to either do it or not? Again, any questions, put them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just keep chatting away.
Or maybe people just want to get out to enjoy the sun.
It's true. If there's no questions, we will give you the gift of time back in your day to that we won't tell anyone, and you can enjoy the sun. Like Grace said, the financials are one of the harder aspects because, especially on the cost side, when you think of the logistics, when you got to think of those Incoterms to understand what you're liable for as far as cost wise as your product is moving across overseas, and depending on which model you choose, because that can get very tricky very fast as far as understanding what is my liability, what is my cost, and that's going to reflect in what my price might be for my product. Because you don't want to get in a situation where you're bearing more costs and actually losing money on the product. We want everyone to have a good experience, if possible, as much as possible.
And we do have templates too, right? SBDC, the Women's Business Centers, we have these financial templates that we can share. So you don't have to create something from scratch. So.
It's something that I'll probably share as well with Kelsey, who can then send after this recording, when she sends out the recording and the links. NASBITE, which is an organization that helps with international imports and exports, developed kind of a template business plan that I like because it has a lot of questions in it. So any of those different sections that Grace has mentioned, sometimes you read the section, you kind of understand it, but you're like, well, I'm still a little hazy on what questions I should be asking myself or what questions I should be answering at this point. So I'll send that to Kelsey so you can see they put together the business plan just like Grace had done, kind of breaking it down by different sections and saying, hey, in this section, here's some examples of the questions you want to try answering. So it often helps you when you're searching, online or wherever you're searching, because now you have a question that you're trying to answer in your brain, right? Rather than just, hey, I got to look at my competitors. Well, here's some questions to help you find your competitors. Or I don't know what my costs are or whatever. And Grace, you yourself do some international exporting, right?
Yes, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I'm an exporter of lobsters.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah.
I always meant to ask, I think you told me once, how did you get into that?
I don't know. I think the one major factor is I just love eating lobster. And when I moved to Maine, I just felt everyone in the world should enjoy lobster. I think really that crossed my mind, and I'm sure it has something to do with how I get started.
Yeah. If only we could find a perfect way to ship a lobster roll, right?
No,
That'd
I
be
know.
that'd be great. Everyone in the world, that would solve everything, right? World peace, world hunger, everything.
Yeah,
Everyone gets a lobster roll.
yeah.
But I often find, so when people are thinking about import or exporting, there's a whole segment of people who decide to do it because of maybe the contacts they have in other countries as well. So remember, the whole world is your oyster. But if you have a contact already in the other country, that's a nice leg in to logistics and understanding how to navigate that country. If you have someone you can talk to that you know already.
That's a very good point, actually. So I've been asked many times, how did I find my first customer? When I started, I had very little resources to start, right? So I did a lot of online research, and I came across a buying mission list for Alaskan seafood. That was even like a few years prior to when I started the business. So I just cold email the list there. And out of a list of 20 some different companies, I think I got one hit. And that customer to this day is still my customer. So again, there's no one way of doing it. That my way was the cheapest way because it didn't cost me anything. But after that, I was able to, well, not because of that one customer, but I learned about the STEP program, took advantage of the STEP program, and started exhibiting in overseas trade shows and get a few more customers that way. So there's a process, whatever works for you, whatever makes sense for you.
I think in day 2 we heard about Maine International Trade Center. I believe it has like an export tech, or maybe it's somehow connected to Maine International Trade Center, but I think maybe someone else puts it on. The export tech kind of series that helps you understand how to export as well. Kind of like an advanced class, I believe.
Yeah.
And then day 1, just to recap, I had a lot of different ways on how to narrow down the world. So if you don't have any connections in other countries that you can utilize to help you make inroads there. And it literally is any country in the world, trying to figure out what countries might demand my products more than other countries. And then you can kind of narrow it down, like Gray said, depending on how each country interacts with international trade, because it isn't a one size fits all. Some countries are better, some countries are worse. Some we have free trade agreements with, which makes it really smooth. Some might have wars going on, so you gotta understand the politics in it too. Zenep said, yes, Mike Stone of Stone and Associates puts it on for the Maine International Trade Center, puts it on as far as export tech. And it's a national program to help early exporters put their strategies together. It is a full semester, which is 4 to 5 sessions. Yeah, thank you. Oftentimes, I'm always amazed by how many resources are actually out there, but knowing them all is almost impossible, right? And that's one of the reasons you have Grace, Women's Business Center, you have SCORE, you have Maine SBDC, you have the SBA, and like we mentioned in another one of these episodes, the 3 emails I can get you the name, right? So if we don't know it, we'll try to find you the best resource possible to reach out to and to touch base with. That being said, I'm not seeing any questions come in through the chat. So I'm thinking of gifting you the benefit of half an hour of a sunny, beautiful day out there in Maine. So thank you for coming. Again, thank you to everyone who has made this week possible. This will be, it has been recorded. It will be sent to you in an email by Kelsey. it will also be converted onto YouTube later on. So if you want to watch it a year from now, go have fun. And if you need to reach out to us, our emails will also be included in the follow-up email. And that way we can get you the resources that you need. Because as I hope this export week is showing, there's a lot of resources available. Understanding them all is not something you want to take on alone. And that's why the resources exist, so that they can help you with that. So have a great SBDC day.